You're listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series.
Welcome to the microphone. Welcome to the studio, Supreme Court Judge David Ashton Lewis.
Thank you, as always. Thank you for having me, and welcome the listeners who will listen to us today.
Well, we had a topic for today, and then Ray Stevens and Russ Walkington got on the radio yesterday. And we had a conversation on the telephone, and we've decided to change topics, haven't we?
And we'll do that topic next week because it is a good topic, and we'll give you a bit of a preview hint. Grace Tame and her deplorable words coming from a young woman who was Australian. Well, she's always going to be an Australian of the Year. And the key word in that is Australian. And her behaviour...
We're coming back to it, remember.
Her behaviour, it was anything but Australian. And we were going to deal with that. But
we'll do that next week.
Yes, that will wait till next. Are you trying to hurry me up?
No. But sometimes you do go on in, and we might get the entire show for next week in this week's version.
Look, you've all heard it on radio. He has defamed me. He will be getting a letter from my solicitor.
Holy Julie. So,
No,
David, the statement you heard yesterday from Ray, let's start with that.
Yes. Well, and look, he's a good politician. I don't care whether you're left-wing or right-wing. He's a good politician, and that's been shown by his holding his seat.
Yes.
And he was discussing with Russ many topics, but they spent a bit of time on youth crime. Now, he proudly said, we've been in office for 15 months and we've brought down crime, not youth crime by 7%. Now, I was sitting in my car yesterday, and listeners, please forgive me for being impatient, but I felt like getting on the phone then and say, not good enough, Ray, and not fast enough. 7%? That means 7 out of every 100 more. What's happening with the other 93? And so it made me reflect on, when you're in government, you are constrained by it, but there are some things that must happen quickly. And then he spoke about, he knew of a young person who'd been on bail and was out on bail and had over 90 times. And so, and then Ray spoke about how the directions of the magistrate and the judges is jail must be an absolute last resort. Now, I agree with rehabilitation where you can rehabilitate, but jail must never be an absolute last resort, because what you're sending a word to the community, we're not protecting you. And I used with you when we were speaking earlier today, when Mad Dog Morgan was going out and shooting people and holding up stations, when Thunderbolt was holding up stagecoaches, and Thunderbolt didn't kill anyone, he didn't misbehave with women. The Kellys, they didn't misbehave with women. Sadly, Ned Kelly shot 3 troopers dead, but when any sign of their it enlivened the whole society, the bench and everyone, to say act. Now, when Kelly was convicted in Melbourne in 1880 and sentenced to death, now there was over 20,000 signatures to spare him.
Look, the way I see this, David, and again, there was a lot that you covered off there, but one of the things that comes to mind is when we talk about the process, we talk about the politicians that we vote into government, the 3 arms of government, and then the rule of law and the judiciary.
Now, you've made...
I was going to point out that all of those mechanisms are here to work on our behalf. All of those mechanisms are here to protect us.
Yes.
And basically, when you put someone in jail or you apprehend them and take them before the courts, is to say, 1, are you guilty? But if you are, This is unacceptable in our society.
Yep.
Now, what message are we sending when we bail them 90-odd times?
I know. And we're not only sending a message to that particular offender, but we're sending a message to the rest of society. Oh, the poor little person, he's come from a bad family. We're not even doing that. We're saying, really, oh, this is not such a bad crime. Crime is crime. And if there is a statute on the books for committing that crime, it must and should be imposed. But because of budgetary constraint, you have told me, anecdotally, you have heard, and maybe we should look this up, but that it costs $300,000-400,000 a year
to incarcerate
to keep
an adult.
an adult in prison. It costs up to $800,000 a year to keep a juvenile. Now, one should check, is that right? But we need to check that out further, and maybe that's something you and I can do over the coming weeks. But we need to also consider punishment. Punishment is not a leisurely stint in a motel or a hotel, and it's not with all the devices of modern life. To be punished, the main thing you lose by being incarcerated is you lose your freedom.
Sure.
Your freedom to go when and where you want. Now, that is a big loss, but it mustn't be padded out with televisions and computers in your cell, and your cell now starts to look more like a motel room. And I'm not saying, and I'm not raising the question, that people should be treated like they're in a prisoner of war camp. But the whole idea is called a prison, it's called a punishment. And I think we've lost in my lifetime, and I'm 76 now, we've lost in my lifetime the balance between punishment fitting a crime. Now, if you've been bailed 90 times, and I go back again, when I first started practicing at the bar in 1979, that bail was for everything except murder. And if you wanted your client to be bailed for murder, you had to make an application before the Supreme Court and to convince the court that your client should be bailed. Now, for everything else, bail was automatic. And that's right, but here's the difference. If you committed one offence whilst on bail and you were arrested, you were put into remand and you waited there until the first offence you committed came up. You didn't get any more bail, and you also had to face then the punishment or the crime of what you committed whilst on bail, because the view was that bail has been a luxury given to you. It's been a benefit, and you're out until your trial. But you've committed an offence whilst out on bail, so one, no more bail, and two, you have abused. But I think we spoke about this in a show some months ago. I heard on the news, again it's anecdotal, that a young man had been bailed 23 times and had committed an offence.
Yes.
So he should have been locked up. He should have been held until the process. So what this all shows, we have changed, and in many ways for the good, since the end of the Second World War, we have changed to be more compassionate. But when compassion has, what we heard from Ray, when compassion has someone out who's had 90 offences and been bailed for all of them, that's not compassion. That is irresponsible stupidity.
Look, we've said it many, many times, David, in many, many shows. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity.
Yes.
Again, we need a change. We need to make sure that these people understand that this is unacceptable. the one that I really comes home to me very loudly is when I hear the victims and the families that have been impacted by a kid who has been killed or a family member who has been killed, whether it be accidentally or whether it not be. And the poor offender grew up in a terrible home. Their leg fell off. This happened to them. Sorry, you've impacted somebody else.
Whether you are, the ones we have to be careful with is people who are mentally defective.
Correct.
But then you don't look necessarily at that. Look at that fellow who stabbed 6 people and killed them in that New South Wales shopping centre, and it took a brave policewoman to shoot him dead. Now, it's sad, but he brought that upon himself. And the question was, he should never have been out in the community. And so you have these modern ideas of rehabilitation, put him amongst the community. But I'm glad to see in that case, even the professionals have said a mistake was made. He should never have been released. Now, I will never be against compassion, but it must always have
and
it.
a second chance is something that should be afforded to those who deserve it.
But compassion must be tempered with common sense and with societal values. Like, I know people who find the whole LGBTQI whatever reprehensible and appalling. Well, the answer to that is those people are human beings.
Sure.
And we've got to a state of maturity where we can recognise lesbian, gay and transgender. Now, but then what tends to happen, we tend to go overboard in these things rather than keep common sense.
Look, I agree with you, David. Look, they don't hurt anyone. They don't harm anyone. They don't pour their views or their beliefs down other people's throats. All they do is just want to live their lives in
their way,
in happiness. Yeah, so I have no problem with any of it.
But look at the sadness what it once was back then. Sure. Gay men are child molesters. Now, I knew gay men who would say to me, I would no more molest a child than you would, David.
It's ignorance, isn't it?
It's ignorance, yes.
Look, I want to come back to the mechanics of it, David, because the statement was that they're labouring under a direction. Maybe a direction is too harsh a word. A view that jail is a last resort. Now, we needed to examine the separation of powers, and again, some people understand that and some people don't. I grew up in an education system that really doesn't teach that anymore.
No.
And so when we vote in a Liberal or a Labor Party or a politician into a seat, they form government. There's a legislative arm that nominate. Is that the correct word?
Yeah, they bring forward a name for a person to be appointed to the district court or county court and the Supreme Court.
So, and the point there is that the government of the day makes laws in consultation or in listening to the community and in the community's best benefit, and the judges uphold those laws.
Yes, that's right.
So they can't give a direction to a judge.
No, they can't.
Again, so where the bit that I struggle with is jail is a last resort.
All right, now there's the first point. You see, I would say no, jail should not be a last resort. Jail should be just one of the punishments. And as I've said, if we haven't got enough jails or youth detention centres, you government, build them.
Yes.
Because we will probably relatively quickly, look, I represented young 19, 20-year-olds who had to go into prison because they were sent there.
Yes.
And I never met one who came out of it, and I was acting for something in relation to that with them. And I can remember 2 of these young men saying, I never want to go back into prison ever again.
So it did its job.
It did its job, and I said, why? Now, one of them was because I hated my life being regimented, that I went to bed when I had to, I woke when I had to, but there was the other side, which I can't mention on radio, but it was the abuse of their rights in prison. And so I'm thinking of two young men saying, please defend me, because I don't want to go back into prison. And I defended them the first time, but I suppose I could be cross with myself, because I then petitioned the judge, look, don't send him to jail, put him on probation, and I remember this judge saying to me, no, Mr. Ashton Lewis, the crime was sufficient to warrant a term of imprisonment. And so that young man went to prison for 3 years. Now, I've never known anyone to come out of prison and say, it was a lark. I was fed 3 times a day and, I had a few mates, and no one ever said that. Because it's the next best thing, is it not, to being executed. Your life has been taken from you. And so to be saying it's a last resort, my answer to those politicians or those judges or those magistrates would be, no, it's not. It's an appropriate punishment for an appropriate crime. Why should it be a last resort? And you'd then hear everyone saying, oh, he's 18, he's a youth. Well, I think if Clive Wall is listening to this and other lawyers are listening to this, I found some 18-year-olds to be as monstrous as 38, 40-year-olds, and crimes they committed were monstrous. So my attitude was punishment should fit the crime, and the crime you have committed was disgraceful. So you've mentioned something else twice, which is really important. We live under the rule of law.
Yes.
Not under the rule of the bleeding heart, not under the rule of the bleeding hearts, not under the rule of the vicious vipers who want to virtually execute people. No, we live under the rule of law. And when the law gets weak,
yes,
people get weak.
Look, I agree with you, David. This is it. It is harsh, and especially if you are the family behind someone you can't control, someone you love,
yes,
someone. But again, to protect society, to protect the community, harshness has to be returned. It needs to be, you've committed or taken away a freedom or persecuted someone else.
Yes.
And you need to be punished for that.
You
need
do,
to understand
yes,
that is the wrong action. You need to correct yourself if you don't want to go back into jail.
And the only way we can get that is primarily to have governments that feel the same.
Sure.
Now, I think we've got in current governments in Queensland a stronger feeling, more in tune with what we are saying than the others. And we'll touch on this on the Grace Tame matter.
Yes.
Because my point is, and this ties in with governments not being politically motivated by left-wing thinking or right-wing thinking, but on thinking the rule of law. We live under the separation of powers. Now, I guarantee, and I'll touch on this, but I'll give the people a snippet, Grace Tame will suffer nothing, absolutely nothing, yet she ranted and raved the most offensive language, and which wasn't appropriate for an Australian of the Year or any sensible, balanced Australian. I don't want Palestinian issues in my country. I don't want Nazi issues in my country. I want Australia in my country. So, but the sad thing is that if it had been some right-wing fellow standing up and yelling out, kill all the Gazans, murdering bees, I'll guarantee he would have been arrested and we'd be listening now to charges being brought against him for hate speech.
Look, I saw a very good interview yesterday with Karl Stefanovic and a lawyer for human rights.
Oh, yes.
And it was to do with the ISIS brides and basically
yes,
and getting passports and visas. And it was interesting to the point that Carl kept wanting to go down, is it right, is it wrong?
Who was he speaking to?
Carl Stefanovic.
Yeah, but who was he speaking to?
I've forgotten the name of the gentleman. He was
yes, go on.
And he was saying this just comes down to the law, and it is absolute. If they were born in this country, they're an Australian citizen, and as long as they follow the rules and do all the right things, they will get a passport.
Yeah, of course, and they should.
And they have to.
And they should, because they either, if you want to look at it in the nicest way, they were being loyal Muslim wives to their husbands, and those men dominate everything. So those wives did, and whether they wanted to or not, obey their husbands and go. Well, if we find out that, but even if they had gone to the level of saying, I support ISIS, there must be a world caliphate, well, that's their words. And at the moment, that one won't be caught under hate speech. And the attitude will be, well, I don't agree with you and it's awful. But as you just touched on, but you're an Australian citizen.
And that is the difficulty,
Yeah,
because you can't take away citizenship for someone who's born here because they now don't have a country.
No, but you can revoke citizenship if someone has another citizenship.
Correct.
And so you can...
So the point being is they can get a passport.
Yes.
They can get a visa and re-enter the country with children who were born out of the country.
Yes.
The issue is that if they've committed a crime outside the country or inside the country, that is where they will be arrested if they return to the country.
Yeah, look, for sure. And Australia does have the power to do that. We do have what is called extraterritorial jurisdiction.
We've only got a few minutes left in the program, David. So we started it with a conversation about the law and the judicial system. And realistically, I think it's time now to challenge the listeners out there. It is time, if they want change, if they think that the way things currently are is nothing that they can do about it, there is something they can do about it.
There is, but it means you all go out, most of you, every 4 years and you vote for a politician and a party. But you don't, when the government is then set, you don't forget it and don't do anything, which most Australians do because we are the lucky, wealthy country. But it is time. Look, I don't know how many times I get berated on, these judges letting these young people out. So the answer, and you've said this before, then do something about it. Start speaking to politicians, and not just one or two. If you've mentioned this, and if 10,000 start complaining to 100 of their local members, believe you me, you watch the change that will come. So we have to get off our comfortable, lazy behinds and just make it clear we are not going to tolerate 18-year-olds stealing cars, breaking into homes, using those cars and then in some instances killing people in them. We're not going to tolerate it. So 7% reduction in crime rate, good, but I could say not good enough and not fast enough.
So the challenge you're issuing, David, is ring your local member and say, we want it fixed.
Yeah.
And the more people that do that forces the government to, hang on a minute, we need to do the right thing for the people who put us in to govern the state or the country on our behalf.
We do, and just remember, we live in, whether it's Labor, I'm using this word, we live in a liberal parliamentary democracy. Democracy comes from the Greek word demos, and demos is the people. So I'm challenging you all, if you're unhappy with the way, and I admire Ray Stevens and I listened to him speak and it's good, but he wasn't here when I came into the station yesterday. I would have said to him, Ray, it was lovely to hear you, but I have two comments to make. Not enough and not good enough.
David Ashton Lewis, thank you very much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
You've been listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series. Support local online content and become a financial supporter today at 4CRB.com.